actually it's a cover to the album Riot by the band Paramore, one of my favorite bands, and the breakout album that got them pretty much well known. If you haven't heard any of their music, you can probably start here. But it's a great cover. The reason I'm showing you this is because it does relate to some stuff that's been going on in the world with the protests. I'll show it to you right now. So I just wanted to show you guys so that you can see that this album cover was updated with some fan of the band created a version of this for the George Floyd protest. You may have seen this image on social media, you may not have, but basically it's a takeoff of the album cover to the Riot album with George Floyd replacing the word riot and the names of many of the people of color, Black people who were unfairly treated by police, in many cases killed or murdered. Just another example of a way to protest, of a way to make a point clear that things are not treated well. Plus, it's just great art. So today, this lesson in this video you're watching is going to cover the protest unit lesson 4, which is article 2 of our look at 4 different articles for the argument essay. And that article is on the pros and cons of rioting. And in this lesson, we'll take a look at what is a riot, what's involved in it, and then obviously the pros and cons, and help you to look at how to complete the assignment. Okay, guys, and when I open up my assignment on Microsoft Teams, when you open it up on Microsoft Teams and you look at the PowerPoint, you're going to see both lesson 3 and 4 in the same PowerPoint, but you're going to go down to this slide, pros and cons of rioting or of riots. It's right above the previous slide that tells you to stop after lesson 3. So when you're ready to continue and you go through this, a couple quotes. Nonviolence leads to the highest ethics, which is the goal of all evolution. Until we stop harming all living beings, we are still savages. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. So Thomas Edison and John F. Kennedy representing the 2 different sides here, perspectives on riots. The Do Now had asked you to look at 3 very well-known riots in recent modern American history, going back to Stonewall in 1969, Crown Heights riots in 1991, and the Rodney King riots, which was, I believe, a couple of years after that. And Do Now ask you to look at these images and to read the information and answer, what do you notice about these images? What do they have in common besides being riots? They're very, even the black and white pictures are very, very clear, very stark about the situation, what's going on. You can see what's happening. You know, it's not, and obviously with the Crown Heights riots, it's not that there weren't color cameras. I think there were even color cameras during Stonewall, but that's, you know, during many newspapers would print in black and white, so the photos would come out in black and white. But that's a aside. Stonewall was a series of spontaneous violent demonstrations by members of the gay community in response to police raid that began in the early morning hours of June 28, 1969 at the Stonewall Inn in the Greenwich Village neighborhood, Manhattan, New York City. Crown Heights, a race riot that took place from August 19 to 21, 1991 in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn, New York City. I would have been 11 at the time, and I do remember reading the news about this and understanding that something wasn't quite right. There was this disagreement, this passionate anger on the streets. I didn't live in that neighborhood, but you know, the tensions or the arguments they would, you know, hear on the television and reporting about what was happening. It was it was interesting at the time. I guess interesting is not the best word for it, but it was definitely, um, it made me aware, I think, not necessarily for the first time, but it definitely made me aware of things were not great in terms of relationships between communities, or could not be at some points. So this was when Black residents turned against an Orthodox Jewish Chabad residents, more Orthodox, more religious, resulting in a deterioration of already tense racial relations in the densely populated community. And the Rodney King riots, this I clearly remembered, and I remember watching an episode of a TV show called A Different World, which was a spinoff of the Cosby Show, and it covered the uh, the situation pretty well. And in terms of understanding the issues, even for a sitcom, it did a great job. Four Los Angeles policemen, three of them white, were acquitted of the savage beating of Rodney King, an African-American man caught on camera by a bystander. A graphic video of the attack was broadcast across the nation and worldwide. Fury over the acquittal, stoked by years of racial and economic inequality in the city, spilled over into the streets, resulting in 5 days of rioting. So, three different riots, three different reasons for why they happened, why they got to the degree they got to. So again, for the do now, we're asking, what do you notice about these images? What do they have in common besides being riots? Okay. Our aim continues our essay topic, our peaceful protest, an effective form of protest. So what is a riot? A riot is a form of civil disorder commonly characterized by a group lashing out in a very violent public disturbance against authority, property, or people. Riots typically involve destruction of property, public or private. The property targeted varies depends on the riot and the inclinations of those involved. So obviously this spring and summer, you saw many different protests that were happening around the country. Most were very peaceful, but especially in the morning and the evening. And then what happened at night? A lot of things happened in the darkness. There were some people who started rioting, destroying building properties and stuff like that. There were people obviously who were angry enough to lash out or desperate enough to lash out. There were also some incidents that were clearly captured of police or undercover or people who could not be identified, who were not a part of the protest movements and would not identify themselves, manipulating by destroying property and making it seem like civilians were taking this on. So unfortunately, when protests happen, there's a lot of control factors that go in and can change the way things happen. And, people can be, it's very ripe for manipulation on many people's sides, and the optics, the perception of what's going on can change because, again, we're in a very highly hypersensitive world. The good news is we live in a world of social media, so that even though there's a general response or idea of what's going on, stuff like Twitter and Facebook, people can update in real time and get the facts out. Usually it's slower than the perception. So for example, there was a moment when, for example, I recall like a gym being destroyed, and it was found, within minutes or hours that an undercover officer or someone allegedly, not someone who basically destroyed the property to try to make it seem like the people did it. But this is what happens sometimes during riots. Again, manipulation, civil disorder, also known as civil disturbance or civil unrest, is an activity arising from a mass act of civil disobedience in which participants become hostile toward authority, Authorities incur difficulties in maintaining public safety and order over this orderly crowd. So unfortunately, a lot of these things can happen as a result. We know the protesters and police have been hurt in riots. Properties burned, looting of businesses. When protests take a turn like this, we naturally wonder why. Was this preventable? Does anyone know how to stop it from happening? When the police is against the excessive use of force, protest is against the excessive use of force by law enforcement, and the police are the ones policing the protest, does the possibility for a riot increase? Tensions flare up. The idea of trying to control what's happening. Obviously, the ideology gets put against each other, and the response often is multiplied. So again, protesting is different from rioting. Protesting, peaceful protesting, is, you know, something that is a right of every American. But again, there was a lot of controversy about the power of a riot. And then again, a lot of things came out of riot, like with Stonewall. One of the things that happened was an increased awareness of the plight of many gay Americans, what was happening, why were they being treated with prejudice, and it resulted in a lot more. It wasn't obviously it was a lot slower in coming, but a lot more awareness of fighting for rights for LGBTQ. Okay. Turns out we do know some of these answers. Researchers have spent 50 years studying the way crowds of protesters and crowds of police behave and what happens when the two interact. One thing they will tell you is that when the police respond by escalating force, wearing riot gear from the start, or using tear gas on protesters, doesn't work. Again, for you guys this summer, you probably saw images and video on TV or on social media, police throwing tear gas to try to push back crowds, and some people kicking it back at the police, throwing at it. So this kind of escalating force really only created more escalating force on either side. In fact, disproportionate police force is one of the things that can make a peaceful protest not so peaceful. Escalating force by police leads to more violence, not less. It tends to create feedback loops, which I was just talking about, where protesters escalate against police, police escalate even further, and both sides become increasingly angry and afraid. And then there are also moments we've seen very clearly where protesters aren't doing anything, and the police rush and try to either hit or push back, and then that leads to even worse consequences. So, you know, protesting is extremely important, and it's a very good thing to have as a tool to get more rights. But there are definitely there are definitely consequences of things that happen as a result. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be protesting, but it does mean we need to be aware of the system that happens when that is created and the cycle that's created when that does happen. All right, so again, when we talk about this, some people claim, argue for, take a side that there are more cons than pros for rioting. Some people claim there are more pros than cons for rioting. Everything I've said before right now, I'm not advocating either position right now in my professional capacity as a teacher. I'm just telling you, we're looking at this because you are going to write your essay answering, are peaceful protests necessary for change? And these are things you can talk about as you, or write about as you go through it. So the pros and the cons, these are called opposing claims. Again, we teach you claim and evidence as a skill. We also teach you alternate and opposing claim as a skill. Alternate meaning just another reason or another claim. Opposing claim is the opposite, or a claim or argument that goes against what you were saying before. It is important when arguing a claim to understand opposing claims. Writers summarize the opposition's viewpoint openly and honestly. Ignoring the opposition is futile, and that the audience is aware of the opposing arguments and will doubt the credibility of an argument that chooses to ignore the opposition rather than deal with it. So this is like a basic debate strategy, right? People know there are different sides to an argument. You want to acknowledge the other side, identify what the other claim would be, and then deal with that, write about it, do what's called a rebuttal, and basically acknowledge it, but say that the side you're arguing for is the side that is the one you believe in, or the one you think is more correct because, and give reasons why. So that's why this article is important. It gives you both the pros and the cons of writing, and that's why it's a useful tool for choosing a strong claim. All right, you've seen this slide earlier in lesson 3, what a claim is versus what a claim is not. You can read that and review that on your own, or you can chat with me, ask me for clarification on Teams if you are still confused on that. All right, so the big assignment that we've been asking you to do, and that you should be working on now, and if not, you should start, is to read the article Pros and Cons of Riots. Again, we have annotations on the article. You know, again, you have the claim and evidence box and the alternate and opposing claim box to do. In fact, I will bring that up in just a second. All right, there we go. So we're going to ask you, in addition to doing the claim evidence explanation box, the next box, opposing claim evidence and rebuttal, explain how the claim you chose is stronger than the opposing claim. Remember, the opposing claim is never the claim that you are arguing. You're arguing for one thing. The opposing claim is something else that you're saying is not as strong as the point you're making. So always guide that, have that as your guide when you write your answer. And again, you're using your own words, you're writing in your own words. You can quote or paraphrase from an article, any evidence, but you're always following that up with sentences of explanation that help to prove your point, that help to rebut against the other side's point. Okay, so I'm going to pause here. I'm going to bring up the Word document just to be a little bit more in depth about that, and then we'll wrap things up. Okay, and when you open up your Microsoft Word document, please do, actually I think this is the only option, is the simple annotation format. I've now changed it to reflect being able to write more easily in the boxes, so that that's the name of the Word document. There's no other documents besides the PowerPoint and this document. So again, the do now is repeated here for you. You would write your response here. Yep, if I click in the box, you know, I can start writing my answer, right? Okay, if you for some reason cannot write in that box, just try to find a space underneath it to write your response. Obviously, we will find it, we will read it, and it will count. Okay. So how do you know what to annotate for this article? Look for clues, for example, questions you have to answer after reading titles of the story. These are clues that it is important to annotate in the margins when you see possible answers to question when you see a pro or a con in the text. So again, when we say write notes in the margins, there are moments in the article that says use this space to jot down answers. Any comments you have so far. So this is where I would write a note. And what you can do is you can say what is important about this section is, and then go on. A question I have about this section is. So either one would work. It doesn't have to be super detailed because these are long articles. There's a lot of boxes. Simple statements, but importantly, they should be your thoughts. They should be your reactions to this, your analysis, what's important, what you think about it. Again, I've did this in earlier videos, but if anybody's just watching this one, didn't see the other ones, when we annotate, we're looking for you to underline or highlight key passages or key points, statistics, information, and you do that by selecting a section using, you can hold down your mouse button and scroll over it, and then, or if you have like a touchpad, you touch, and then this, an option should come up to select, and then you choose that section, and then your options should come up of copy, paste, right, cut. You want to copy, so, or sorry, you want to underline. In fact, you don't want to copy, you don't want to cut, you don't want to paste. You want to Control U on your computer or on your touch screen. If the B/I/U option comes up, click on that and then press bold or underline, anything to highlight the section, right? I don't recommend bold because some passages in the article are already bolded or italicized for you, like you can see up here. So underline makes us aware that you are actively annotating. Even better is when you go up to the highlight toolbar and then just highlight that passage. And again, you can choose your colors. There's a bunch of colors here. Honestly, black is not a good color because it highlights, it blocks out the text. It looks like a document that's been redacted, and you don't want that to happen because then you can't see it. And we can't see it, but there are many other colors that you can choose from. All right, and as we go down here, we may ask you the definition of vocabulary words like counterproductive. You can get the information from the text, you know, the context clues, or you can look up dictionary.com. Valuable tool. It's there for you. It's free. Type in the word, the definition comes up, and just write the definition down. But make sure it's the proper definition for the sentence. You don't want to, you know, do the wrong definition. Many words have multiple definitions in context. All right. And as we head on down to the article, again, just to repeat the claim analysis chart here, that's these bottom parts, again, these are very crucial for the assignment. We want you to do them. That's the big part of what we're looking at for your grade. Obviously, the do now, annotations, and the claim, and in this case, opposing claim boxes, okay? That is what we're looking for here. Again, when you're doing your work, you can save at any time, but make sure that only when you're ready that you select the turn in option, because then it's harder for you to get the work back. I don't think you can work on it anymore after that. So you can always save, or it auto saves, I believe, at this point, but you can save, go back to work if you need to. Don't turn in unless you need to, unless you're ready for Ms. Bosman, Mr. Weiss, or I, depending on your class, to look at the work. And that's going to do it for this video for protest lesson 4. Hope that helped. If anybody still has any questions, please do reach out to me on chat or text. You will obviously get my help as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.